Many people think that scientists have proved that the Earth is very, very old, billions of years old, and that somehow proves evolution. Of course, we should realize that even if we could show that the Earth is ancient, extremely ancient, that doesn't in itself prove either creation or evolution. However, if we could prove that the Earth cannot be extremely ancient, that would certainly throw a lot of doubt on evolution, because evolution needs a lot of time. Needs a lot of time because it relies on chance moving around of particles to hit just right to create something. And that is, as we've experienced in the whole of recorded history, that's never been observed. One can explain that away by saying, okay, but we've just not had enough time yet. And if there was a lot of time, then, it could happen. So the issue of time doesn't prove either of the theories, but it is necessary for evolution to be at all reasonable. Further, the Bible gives a clear dating system in the genealogies. And if you count that up, that comes up to a period of about 6,000 years from creation to present. So if it could be shown for sure that the Earth was millions of years old, that would be in conflict with taking the Bible literally. So that explains why time is relevant to the two ideas of origins. Now, how do we have any idea about how old things are? Because, of course, they can't tell us how old they are. There isn't a date on a rock or a fossil to tell us how old it is. We can only form inferences based on data about that rock. There are various radiometric dating methods that are used on rocks. Now, what you have to understand is that fossils themselves can only be dated with carbon dating. Fossils are only ever found in a kind of rock called sedimentary rock. And sedimentary rock cannot be dated. The fossil material itself contains carbon, and that can be dated according to a method called carbon dating. The other methods of dating do not apply to fossil material. Carbon dating always gives relatively young ages, far younger than what evolutionists need for their theory. Now, there are a lot of problems with carbon dating, so that, the problems I'm going to raise just now about the other kinds of dating apply to carbon dating too, but obviously to a lesser extent, I suppose, which is why it gives so much shorter ages. But evolutionists generally reject the use of carbon dating because they see that it gives dates far too young. So now we have a big problem. Evolutionists don't accept the only kind of dating that you can do on the fossils themselves. What do they then accept? They accept dating done on igneous rock. But the problem is you can never get fossils in igneous rock. So you have to estimate where the nearest igneous rock is relative to the fossils you've just found and assume that those rocks will have the same age as the rocks in which the fossils are found. How can you prove that assumption's right? How can you even, never mind prove, just justify that you've got any evidence that suggests you're reasonable in making that assumption? Okay, but let's maybe accept that, and we take this rock that can then be dated with these other radiometric datings, and let's assume, okay, for sure we know that it is the same age as the fossil. We still encounter problems. Because what is done? You see, inside rock, one element sometimes changes into another by radioactive decay. So, for example, uranium can change into lead. We look at the rate at which uranium changes into lead today, and we assume that that rate occurred throughout history. Where do we have evidence that that should be so? Of course, we don't have any. In fact, it seems quite illogical that that should be so. Rates don't seem to be constant. Many of the rates that we've observed over time are not constant. They change. And even the rate of change is not necessarily constant because it can be affected by various factors which are beyond our control and which we don't know about. So here's a big problem already. But it's not the only problem. You see, what happens is the scientists assume that there was only uranium in that rock and no lead at the start of that rock's creation. How on earth do they know that? And there's no way they can know whether there was none or there was lots. But they have to assume, because there's nothing else they can do. There's no other way that they can work. Can you see that the kind of answer you're going to get of how old that rock is based on the ratio of uranium to lead? How on earth can you place much value and validity on that answer, since it is based on so many unverifiable assumptions? And even if you could, you still have the problem that even if you've dated that rock, that doesn't date the fossil necessarily, because how do you know that that was the same age as the fossil? This is a massive problem, and it really means that you can't date rock. So if you can't date rock and you can't date fossils, then where do you get your ages from to justify that there was the time available for evolution? Of course, one could speak a lot more about evidence that suggests that the Earth and the universe are very, very young.